Previously on Pax Americana. UTS Galactica arrives home after a successful operation in 109 Aquarii. The captain of the ship, Dwayne Gavazio, gave an interview upon his ship's return. In it, he stated that the enemy took significant losses and the Galactica's crew performed fantastically, exceeding all expectations, and that he is excited to get back out to the frontier to ensure safe travel for all human ships. Mineral consumption exceeds mineral exploitation as the government looks to increase mining of key trans-Newtonian resources to ensure the security in its planned naval build-up. This increase of mining is vital to the planned carrier program, and it's unsure if these targets can actually be met in time. Next up on Pax Americana. The first Akin-class carrier was commissioned earlier this year. The UTS Akin became the largest warship ever built. Its goal is to take on the renewed alien threat with a large carrier air wing and additional magazine space. It's expected to be important interim class before larger designs such as 60,000-ton fleet carriers can be fielded. The first terraforming platforms have arrived above the skies of Terra Nova. This has prompted increased colonization to the world, with many expecting the thawing of the ice planet to bring about a new Earth. Plans have already been made for the establishment of additional colonies on the planet and the native industrial capability. Hello and welcome back to episode 8 of Pax Americana in Aurora 4X. In the last episode, we continued to defend ourselves against the alien threat, and we also continued our expansion outwards, exploitation of new mineral sources, and really kind of discussed how we are going to sustain our planned build-up and expansion of the Empire. Well, not so much the Empire, but of humanity. As part of that, we have been needing to, part of that defense, as you can see on screen, we're setting up new squadrons for patrol operations. And those are going to come with the frigate kind. We're going to need a lot of frigates to be able to do that. And we're also setting up maintenance bases and fighter bases for checkpoint defense at areas as needed. What I do want to say though is, before we get into probably today's episode, is that in this series I'm going to be trying to primarily focus on finding those NPRs and fighting them. At the end of the day, that's what I want to do. I want to have diplomacy or fight those NPRs, and that's going to be the main goal of the series. The raiders and the precursors are primarily just those very, intermediary threats that are going to give us something to test our capability against, but, it's not going to be the final kind of thing, right? And so that's why we need to continue our exploration. And as we get into 1991 here, we got another 9 years before our next generation fleet really start coming into production. This kind of this development is going to be really, really important, and we're at a point now where we nearly have our ion drive technology, and that ion drive technology is really going to change things for us. Some weakness that I think a lot of people have been talking about is how are we going to deal with the fact that. How are we going to deal with the fact that in a jump point assault, how does our fleet operate, right? Because we have carriers, we have all these ships, and, going through a jump point, you're going to have to be a certain distance from that jump point. And if you can't squadron jump, you're going to have some serious issues, which is why I will be looking, I think, in the future at something to deal with that. So on screen right now, we're just setting up some fighter defense bases, and this is going to be deployed to the frontier. Here is the system of Lalanid 21185. Or Laland 2185, and in the system we are going to be setting up a checkpoint over near Proxima Centauri jump point, so one of the jump points here, with their appropriate fighter defense capability. Now, of course, I'm going to need to be careful about the amount of maintenance supplies that these will have, and about actually making sure that they are capable, right? But let's continue on, shall we? So the main thing that we're going to be doing is we set the checkpoint up, we're going to set these patrols up. This is a really time-consuming and expensive process in terms of actual expansion outwards, because you got to keep in mind, right? Like, when you expand to a system now, it's not just about putting a colony down, getting colonists in, moving the infrastructure. It's about setting up tracking stations, defense capability, sensors across the system, defenses everywhere that's needed, and that's really, really expensive in a lot of different ways, and time consuming. We have multiple areas we want to expand into, but to do that is going to be really, really consuming on our part, and it's something that we're going to need to expand quite significantly if we want to achieve our aims. And the way that we're going to expand the quickness of being able to do that is bigger colony ships, bigger freighters, more prudent on building jump point stabilization across the galaxy, and then finally is the expansion of the Navy so that we have enough ships where we can spare this amount, right? We probably have, most of our frigates are currently in service or doing something. There's probably about 6 frigates that aren't, but the other frigates that are currently patrolling, as we can see here, we have Frigate Patrol Squadron 3 going from Laland 20185 to Proxima Centauri, and those are going to be providing a patrol from those 2 systems. So we've got a patrol going from Sol to Laland 20185, and then we have a patrol going from Laland to Proxima Centauri, where Terra Nova presides. And these patrols deter, they provide quick response if we need to, and also they're very good for the RP and the realism of the fact. So we've got those guys set up. We've got the Antium. I couldn't read the other ones, but we have those ships ready to go. We also nearly have the Akon ready to be finished. That'll be finished on November 5th, 1991, which is awesome to say the least. And we're continuing our expansion for resources. The Schwinn Group here is already mining nearly 5,000 tons of resources, and we need to continue that expansion of mining as much as we possibly can. Most particularly, Saurium, Corundium, and Galasite are the primary things that we're really starting to run out of, and then we need to start increasing our production. We're currently building fuel harvesters, research facilities, terraformers, and naval shipyards. I'm building naval shipyards because we're going to need them for some of our classes, for cruiser class and some other things. We're building terraformers because we again want to continue our terraforming of Terra Nova, and we're building fuel harvesters because we need to increase fuel production, because as we expand our fleet out, that size in terms of consumption of fuel is going to be significantly increased, right? Every operation we undertake with our fleet is going to consume significant amounts of fuel. The planned 60,000 ton carriers, they take nearly 8 million liters of fuel each to be able to fully go from 0 to 20 billion kilometers. That's a lot of fuel. That's enough to, that's multiple destroyer squadrons of fuel, and we need to be able to support that quite significantly if we are, to do our job. I'm also resetting up the maintenance transport fleet, so these are moving and maintenance supplies from Earth and transporting them to the colonies to ensure that they have enough to maintain the destroyers and other capability that they're in orbit of. And also Terra Nova is making really great progress at nearly 10 million people, and at that point we'll be able to actually look at adding in additional capability there in terms of mining or whatnot. We also have all of our planetary defense guns set up. We need to wait to build a few more of those. I think we handle that. And then we also have all of our naval shipyards working at brisk pace. So here we go. We're setting up Planetary Defense Command number 3. And I'm setting up the STOs, but I realize I need more surface to orbit weapons to actually be able to do that. So I think in a little bit I do add those on for the surface to orbit weapons. Earth, actually, in terms of population, we're growing really fast. We actually have a massive unemployment issue. We have 200 million people who are not employed, which means there's about 8% unemployment on the planet of Earth, which is pretty significant when we consider the fact that we need to get every single person in a job, ideally. And that's 200 million additional workers, which we can ship elsewhere, though. So it, works out. We'll eventually ship those people over to Terra Nova, over to these places, and start, putting them into the mining operations, putting them into shipbuilding. Shipbuilding and mining and research are the primary, operations, really. But we are actually making some really good progress. The first ore mines have arrived on the rich mineral asteroid that we have, one of the rich mineral asteroids in 61 Cygni. And we've also started the terraforming progress on Terra Nova Prime. So on Terra Nova Prime, it's currently very, very cold. We need to warm that planet up. And once it's warmed up, it'll be a completely habitable world for us. And that'll be awesome for the people there, because then we can just keep shipping in metric crap tons of colonists. And then we can start shipping in mines and other things. The polar ice caps there melting on Mars, which you expect to see. And we are trying, yeah, because currently, as you can see here, where maximum temperature is -2 degrees, maximum, well, the least temperature it has is -26, and the most it has is -2. We need to get that to 0 degrees at the least temp, and like probably 15 degrees at max. The Galathea, Island, and Lapland finish up being constructed, so those are 3 new destroyer class vessels that we'll be needing for the Aachen classes group. Now, the fighter programs we're currently looking at, I've been taking around with them on the Discord and with some people, and we've come up with the plan. However, this is going to require significantly more development than previously expected, and because of this, the Aachen class carrier is going to have to carry the existing F-8A fighter wings while we wait for the planned, what I'm going to be calling the FX-80 and the FX-120 fighters, which will be taking over the primary job for the fleet carriers and for the group. Again, the Aachen classes are just an interim. There will be 2 additional vessels that will be filled in before we get to the fleet carriers, and we will maintain a fleet of 10 carriers total. And we again need to expand our fuel production, need to expand our maintenance production, so we can start deploying these guys to the frontier. My goal is to eventually start deploying the first, the light carriers, the initial light carriers to the frontier for forward deployments to defend. But before that, we're going to need a lot more maintenance supplies. And again, the Schwinn company here on, I think this Halley's Comet, I forget which one is based around, but we're manning a lot of resources actually here. And we've got these freight groups which are now going to be moving minerals from New Eden, which is collecting them and bringing them back to Earth. And once we have those construction factories in place that we're going to plan to put on New Eden, we're going to put a limit there, and so they'll have a certain amount of minerals left that we won't pick up that will be there for construction efforts. We also have, again, refitting the exploration ships, which are slowing down their exploration because we had to bring all the ships back, had to make sure they're refit, had to make sure they're overhauled. But most of them are now in a good enough position. And we're also now moving over the terraformers as well as the fuel harvesters, which we've been building to continue exploitation efforts. The Pacific Ocean finishes up their overhaul, and our naval shipyards. We've built 3 new naval shipyards. One of them is going to be for our large fleet carrier. The other one's going to be for the cruisers that we'll be needing. So the 17,500 ton cruisers that will be supplementing, capability quite significantly. And we now are sending over the Pacific Ocean to begin exploration. We're sending over the other exploration ships, and we'll need to be considering exactly where we're going to take exploration, right? So we've come up with a few threats. The exploration ships are a bit all over the place in terms of currently they're too late defended for what I need, and they're also not capable of doing sense. That's because we built them in a way that wasn't necessarily the best. And so what we're likely going to do is going to look for a larger design exploration ship, about 15,000 tons, with serious capability to defend itself, serious scientific capability, and much more efficient engines. Now, as you can see on screen, I didn't talk about as it happened just there, but we have the Aachen class finishing up, the first Aachen class vessel, the UTS Aachen. And it's got its 3 destroyers, the Galathea, Island, and Lapland. And we're going to be outfitting that with F-8A fighters, approximately, and so that's the first 30,000 ton ship. That's the biggest proper military vessel we've ever built, and we'll be again outfitting that with F-8A fighters and SEW E-1As, and we'll eventually replace the fighter complement. And in terms of the procurement efforts for both exploration ships, for any ships, right, for the carriers or whatever, as we reach the limit of, say, okay, we want to maintain 10 carriers, eventually the smaller carriers will become obsolete, and we'll just rotate them out and we'll replace them with fleet carriers, right? We'll replace them with bigger carriers. The light carrier class itself, I see as kind of transitioning into kind of a escort or assault based vessel, where its primary purpose will be assisting smaller ships with their fighter complement and providing kind of command and control capability, as well as launching utility crafts, right? So that is EW warfare, refueling, all this other stuff, right? Loch Ness, again, we've been exploring. We don't find anything too habitable. We do find a few systems. Nothing of like Proxima Centauri level scales or anything like that. So again, we're going to be incrementing along here as we enter 1992. We're making good progress, and I do believe did we order the second Aachen, which is going to be the final of the Aachen class vessels. That would be 5 Adamant and 2 Aachen class. Then we're going to have the 3 newer class. I'm not sure if I said as well, the F-12 Merlin, we're going to be cancelling that. That's not going to be going into service. I call it the Merlin, but that is going to be a defunct class for now, a fighter. And the new 60,000-ton fleet carriers are going to be called the North America class, and they'll be named for regions and continents of the planet Earth. So we will have the Africa, UTS Africa, the UTS Europe, the UTS Middle East, the UTS Asia, the UTS South America, all of these classes, right? And they will be primary names because they represent a big chunk of humanity. They represent a big chunk of humanity's work, and they also carry out over 1,000 crew members on board at any one time. So it's pretty significant in terms of name association, and that's why they're going to be named after those continents. Eventually, we might name them after the colonies. So we might name the UTS Terra Nova, the UTS New Eden, these kind of newer names, right? The UTS Horatio, and we'll begin construction of additional short-range tankers because I do realize I need more to actually transport the fuel of the new fuel harvesters we've actually been building. And I have a look at Mars here, and we're at -12 before it becomes fully habitable in terms of temperature. Now we will need to add in oxygen, and we'll need to add in water for Mars to become habitable. Because currently it only has 10% of liquid water. We need 20% liquid water for proper habitability, and then we also need 0.1 atmospheres of oxygen on the planet for it to be breathable by human beings. As we can see here, we are going ahead with a lot of ship expansion. I've halted building vessels. I don't build them consecutively immediately because that is very expensive. We wait a little bit, then we build another vessel. We'll build an Aachen. We'll build this every so often because currently the biggest expense in terms of shipbuilding is missile production and ship production. And we can't build missiles because we don't have any thorium, like the mineral thorium. This is a really big problem, and we need to increase our mining of it as best as we can. Now, luckily, rich mineral asteroids like DBVSC SC has 140,000 tons of 0.9 excess thorium that we need to start shipping in, and we need to continue to look for more and more of these thorium supplies as best as we can, because without that, we're going to be in really, really rough shape. Terra Nova reaches 10 million people. Again, we're making really great progress in terms of colonization efforts. We're shipping over cargo short station, refueling station, ordnance transfer station. We're going to start shipping over ordnance itself, and we're going to turn Terra Nova Prime into a real jewel. And in fact, it might overtake what New Eden becomes in terms of actual mining operation. New Eden might just stay as a mining colony, and Terra Nova might be the manufacturing center. Just because of its ability to be easily terraformed, it will be able to support a large population of workers, which we need to actually man the factories, man the shipyards, man the capabilities, all these things, right? So that is probably going to be something into consideration, because the actual system of Proxima Centauri itself is not actually too rich in resources. It has a gas giant, it has some minerals, but nothing like Cygni, where it has all these asteroids, all these additional planets that have minerals on them that we can really just start shipping over and start construction efforts as needed. And you may be asking yourself, why would you even do that, right? Because Earth is so nearby, and Earth has its population already, it's habitable, and you're right, 100%. But if we can increase our population growth, and by extent increase our snowball effect, if we move population from Earth to other worlds, because smaller populations grow quicker than larger populations, and the kind of cutoff point is around 200, 300 million people, right? So I want to grow Terra Nova to maybe 100 million people, 150 million people with colonization, and those 150 million people are going to need jobs, right? And so it's either going to be mining, it's either going to be shipyards, it's either going to be construction factories, and as Proxima Centauri is further afield, the idea of either constructing maintenance supplies at the area or also constructing infrastructure and stuff to support that can be really, really big, right? 100 construction factories, that's only like 2.5 million people, right? It's not that many people, because 50,000 people per construction factory, that means 500,000 people per thing. So it's only, what would that be? 100,000. It's only 5 million people, right? So 5 million people can man 100 construction factories. 100 construction factories can provide us with about 1,200 build points. And those 1,200 build points can build, 100 or 10 construction factories per year, because construction factories are 120 build points, and so that can kind of snowball itself. We have about 1,600 construction factories on Earth, and that takes its associated amount of time. We've only actually been in the game for what's that now, 12, 14 years. And so we've actually made a really significant amount of progress when you consider that it's only been 14 years over the last 7 episodes. And we again order up the next Akin class vessel. I believe it's the Pacifica, so the UTS Pacifica. Again, using Galactica names, and we're going to transition that to the next planned names that we'll be using. You can see here we already got the candidate class shipyard ready to go for the planned next, the Austria class vessel, and then we've also, which is what we're calling the new destroyer. And we're building up 3 new destroyers, which is going to be the Argentina, Iceland, and Iraq. And then those will be the last Canada-class vessels before we transition into the planned Austria class. And again, as time goes on, we're going to maintain the same numbers of destroyers, but we're going to replace or scrap the old destroyers and replace them with the newer variant. Because these can't just be refits. They're going to have to be completely new hulls, completely new ships, before we can really do anything there. Another thing that's we're going to be needing is fighter factories. Something that I really noticed is we actually have really low fighter factory production capability, a lot less anyway than I would otherwise want. And when we're considering we're using a primarily carrier doctrine, not being able to build missiles or fighters quickly enough sounds like a horrendously bad idea for our primary defensive efforts. So it's something to consider. And we're continuing exploration here. We've got Delta Carinae, which is an empty system. I'd say about like 40% of systems are empty, and then the remainders are habitable, right? As you can see here, Terra Nova Prime has 5 million available workers, and I'm like, okay, well, what do we do with that population? I'm not really too sure right now, but I'm thinking maintenance facilities, mining, these kind of things are going to be really, really important. Another thing that's going on is we're actually getting a lot more main mines to the Schwint group, which is a previously civilian mining operation that we've now changed. Each CMC, by the way, is 10,000, not 10,000, is 10 automated mines worth. So if you've got 11 CMCs, that's 110 automated mines, which is actually really significant when you think about it. Troop haulers have moved over Planetary Defense Command to Proxima Centauri, so Terra Nova now has surface orbit weapons providing defensive capability to the planet, as well as the extra 25,000 tons of ground forces, which are able to defend in conjunction with the Army Division. And I remember seeing a comment about how it's really annoying that to upgrade and replace forces on these planets is really, really annoying to do so. And I kind of agree. It can be really, really annoying. Obviously, 2.2 will see improvements, but in terms of our capability, the forces we actually have on these planets, we will eventually replace them, as in they will eventually be scrapped or removed. But largely speaking, these ground forces can remain in service for quite a significant period of time, because entrenchment and bodies doesn't really change. The amount of HP and the amount of stuff, it doesn't really change too much with technology to a point where they're completely obsolete. And to some degree they may be, but overall, it still works out pretty well for us. So we did finish up research of the ion drive now, so that's a big deal. And so we're going to begin again the research into the planned projects of the CVX 2000, all these things. Now, unfortunately, when you make something a future prototype, you have to remake the engine again, because you can't just hit the research prototype button. It's unfortunate. So we're going to have to do that. We're also going to have to research a bunch of new active sensors, a bunch of new missile launchers, a bunch of new beam fire controls, and all this other stuff. There's a ton of stuff we need to research and do. Also the most important thing is going to be new missiles, right? So all of our existing missiles are going to be outdated. We're going to still use them, obviously. Ordnance is ordnance. We're going to use the ordnance. The ships that are currently operating with them, or the stockpiles we currently have, are going to sit there. But for new classes of warship, we're going to use the newest missiles possible when on major fleet operation, right? But for your frontier colony, your frontier outpost, using the SIM-4As or 4Bs is not really going to be a problem, because they're still going to be pretty damn effective at their job against the threats that you're going to be facing, right? They're just not going to be something we're going to want against maybe that massive precursor fleet. Versus that massive precursor fleet, we're going to have to bring a lot of fighters, a lot of capability. With 10 carriers, we're going to have, 300 fighters potentially capable. That's a lot, and those 300 fighters are going to be able to fire thousands of missiles, and that's the kind of capability we would need to destroy those enemy ships. The ordnance expenditure for that is going to be ridiculous. However, if it means securing the system or not securing the system, I say that's a pretty good job. And we still have yet to kind of, both RP-wise and kind of out of RP, understand how we would even assault a planet, right? Let's say we destroyed every single precursor enemy ship with our new ships, our CGX, our CVX, all these new ships. We win naval superiority. How do we then assault a planet? Because they're going to be fully entrenched, they're going to have unknown capability, and we don't really have offensive weaponry in terms of ground forces. We have army divisions, we have 800,000 tons of ground forces, and we have planetary defense commands. All these things are defensive in nature. They're emplaced. They don't have any heavy armor, and their primary job is keeping control of the populace, and also ensuring their protection in that regard. However, we're going to need something to assault, and so I think in the next episode we're going to talk about a little bit more, but we're going to talk about how we're going to design kind of our primary offensive ground forces for the purposes of attacking a planet. How we're going to go about doing that, and what that's going to mean in terms of fighting, right? Because our focus has primarily been on naval combat, and that's because, well, everything's done through space. But ground forces are going to be so important if we are to secure worlds properly. Because yes, we could bomb a planet into oblivion, but the cost for that is going to be significant, and also the cost on the actual planet itself is also going to be significant. Ideally, we want to land troops, secure the planet, secure its resources, and then incorporate that into the country, into the republic. But yeah, with the ion drives now on, everything's it actually arrived quicker than I expected. With that on, we're now really going forward, and developing those new engines. Now, for the fighters and for some of the other classes, I'm going to wait until we have a few things. Power boost 2.5x, fuel efficiency tax potentially, and also developments to reactor power boost. Because we're going to see a move away, and we'll get into this probably next episode, from the current kind of heavy missile firepower focused fighters to mixing it up. So we're going to have railguns on those fighters, on the new generation of fighters, as well as missiles, and that will allow us to put multiple roles, provide point defense, provide missile capability, so that we can also finish off enemy ships, we can swarm enemy ships, and there's going to be a lot of benefit there. So we're going to see that eventually. I believe we're setting up transportation to Nelson Military Outpost, which is where we have our defense for the fuel harvesters in 61 Cygni. So we're making, of course, all that effort to make sure that they're resupply. We'll do that every 360 days. Again, fuel consumption is going to probably ramp up significantly, so well is maintenance supplies. Remember, every single ship we set up to one of those patrols, they're using fuel constantly, they're using supplies constantly, and we're going to need to continue that expansion outward. So fuel production technologies, as well as increasing fuel production harvesting, is going to be a big deal. We are building out those terraformers, and we are going to be probably sending them over to Terra Nova again. Terra Nova hitting 12 million people. It's now a bigger population than Luna and Mercury and Mars. Now, all those colonies haven't really taken off as well, because they are not got any minerals on them really, except for Mercury, and there's some other reasons, but I'm waiting for Mars to be terraformed before we really increase its population, because again, that can grow a lot of pop, and we can also put offload production capability to the population as well. That's another thing. Smaller populations have bigger fraction of people who actually work in jobs compared to anything else, which is a really big deal. So actually having a lot of smaller populations can be much more beneficial in terms of the actual workforce you have than bigger populations. That's something to consider, right? Nelson's at 3 million people. I'm pretty happy with that. I think we set Nelson now to military restricted. I forget exactly what we do. We'll continue to build more terraformers as well. As we see Terra Nova Prime, if we can just get this temperature sorted out here, we're going to be in a really, really good place. We're only minus 4.6 degrees off from the temperature on Mars being completely fine for people to live. And we find a system of Pegasi, which has quite a few decent worlds around it. So that's nice. But yeah, I'll see you guys next time. Peace and like, comment, subscribe, really, really sign out, and goodbye.